I had been living in Chicago for almost 8 years, building the kind of life I once only dreamed about. My condo overlooked Lake Michigan. My job as a senior project manager at a fast-growing tech firm paid me more than I ever thought I'd earn, and I was finally preparing to launch my own consulting company by the end of the year. My world was busy, structured, and entirely mine. So when Mom called from Portland, Oregon, asking me to come home for her 58th birthday, I hesitated. Home was complicated. Still, I booked the flight. Maybe part of me wanted to see if things had changed. Maybe part of me still hoped they could. When I landed, the city felt smaller than I remembered. The drive from the airport to my parents' house passed familiar landmarks: the bakery that still sold fresh cinnamon rolls, the hardware store Dad had sworn by, the old neighborhood park that now looked strangely quiet. Their house, a two-story place with faded blue shutters and a tidy front yard, stood just as it had when I left 8 years ago. Only now, the paint peeled a little more, and the garden Mom loved was filled with weeds. Dad opened the door before I even knocked. His hair had gone completely gray, and his once sturdy frame seemed thinner, though his handshake was still as firm as ever. "You're early," he said, smiling in that polite, almost guarded way of his. "Traffic was light," I said. Mom came rushing from the kitchen, wiping her hands on a dish towel. "Allison," she said, pulling me into a hug that smelled like vanilla frosting and nostalgia. For a moment, I felt safe again, like the little girl who used to sit on the counter while she baked cookies. But the feeling didn't last. It never did in that house. Brian was already there, lounging on the couch like he owned the place. 2 years older than me, he'd always been Dad's favorite, the golden child who could do no wrong. Even now, at 31, he still acted like the rules never applied to him. His dark hair was slicked back, his shirt unbuttoned just enough to show off a gold chain I'd never seen before. "Look who decided to show up," he said, smirking. "Nice to see you too," I replied. Dinner that night was awkward. Mom tried to fill the silence with cheerful conversation, asking about my work, my condo, whether I'd met anyone special, while Dad mostly talked about his construction company. Brian, on the other hand, barely said a word. He just kept checking his phone, pretending to be busy. When dessert came out, a strawberry cake Mom had baked from scratch, Brian finally spoke. "Hey, Al, can we talk for a minute?" "Outside." I followed him to the patio, where the pool glimmered under soft backyard lights. The night air was cool, and for a moment, I thought maybe he wanted to apologize for all the years of tension between us. Instead, he leaned against the railing and said, "I need a favor." I felt my stomach tighten. "What kind of favor?" "Just a loan. Short-term. $33,000. I blinked, unsure if I'd heard right. "33,000? He nodded, trying to sound casual. "I'm working on a big business deal, a luxury condo development. I just need some liquid cash to secure my spot with the developer. Once the project closes, I'll pay you back. Promise." It was the same confident tone he used as a teenager whenever he wanted to borrow something and never return it. "Why not go to a bank?" I asked. "Banks take forever," he said, waving a hand dismissively. "This deal moves fast. I need to show proof of funds by Monday." "Brian, that's a lot of money," I said quietly. "You can afford it," he replied, his voice sharp. "You're the successful one, remember?" The words stung more than I wanted to admit. I had worked for everything I owned, every dollar, every degree, every promotion. Meanwhile, he had spent most of his adult life jumping from one failed venture to another. I looked at him, really looked at him, and noticed the dark circles under his eyes, the faint tremor in his hands. Something wasn't right. "I'll think about it," I said finally, wanting to end the conversation. "Think fast," he said, forcing a smile. "I need an answer by tomorrow morning." That night, lying in my old bedroom, I couldn't sleep. The posters I'd left behind were gone, replaced by generic wall art Mom must have bought to make the room look more like a guest space. But the memories were still there, of being 12 and crying after Brian broke my science project, of Dad telling me not to be so sensitive, of Mom slipping me an apology cookie when no one was looking. I opened my laptop and stared at my business plan, the one I'd been perfecting for months. Every chart, Every calculation represented years of hard work. That laptop was more valuable to me than any jewelry or car. I guarded it the way some people guard their hearts. Still, something about Brian's request wouldn't leave me alone. Why such a specific amount? Why not 30,000 or 35? It felt rehearsed. I opened a new tab and messaged a friend of mine, Samantha, who worked in real estate development back in Portland. Hey, I typed, do you know of any luxury condo projects opening up right now that need investors? A few minutes later, she replied, nope, not in the last 6 months. Why? Just checking on something, I wrote back, though my pulse had already started to quicken. Then, almost without thinking, I scrolled through my contacts and found a number I hadn't called in over a year. Vanessa, my brother's ex-wife. The divorce had been messy, and though I'd always liked her, Brian had made it clear she wasn't welcome at family gatherings anymore. When she answered, her voice was tired but kind. Allison?
Wow.
It's been a while. I know, I said softly. This might be strange, but has Brian mentioned anything about a condo project? There was a long pause. Then she sighed. He's still gambling, isn't he? My heart sank. What do you mean? He owes money to some people. I think he's in deeper than he admits. Before our divorce, he tried to take out a second mortgage without telling me. My lawyer caught it just in time. I closed my eyes. So, this isn't about business. No, she said. It's about debt. After we hung up, I sat in silence for a long time. The quiet hum of the pool filter outside echoed faintly through the window, a sound that used to comfort me as a child. Now, it only reminded me of how fragile everything was. I looked at my laptop again, the glow of the screen reflecting off the framed photo of my family on the nightstand. Mom smiling brightly, Dad proud, Brian standing next to me with that same smug expression he'd worn tonight. By midnight, I knew my answer. Tomorrow, I would tell him no, and I would mean it this time. The next morning began beautifully, at least on the surface. Sunlight poured through the kitchen windows, glinting off the clean tile floor as Mom hummed softly to herself, slicing peaches for the fruit salad. Dad was already outside, setting up the grill like he always did when the weather was good. The scent of marinated chicken and charcoal drifted through the open sliding doors. Everything looked peaceful, almost normal, the kind of weekend afternoon families post online to look happy. But beneath that quiet, there was a tension I could feel in my bones. I woke up early, as I usually do, made a cup of black coffee, and took my laptop to the patio. I had a few urgent emails to send to clients back in Chicago, and I wanted to wrap them up before family chaos began. My silver MacBook gleamed under the morning light, the one thing that connected me to the life I'd built. My projects, clients, notes, business plans, everything. While typing, I could see my reflection on the laptop screen, calm face, steady hands, but eyes that gave me away. I was still thinking about the conversation with Brian the night before. $33,000 wasn't pocket change. He had asked with the same careless entitlement he always carried, as if my hard work was an endless source for his next mistake. At around 11, Brian finally came outside. He looked different. Too put together for a lazy Saturday morning, pressed shirt, jeans that weren't ripped, and that fake smile that never quite reached his eyes. He grabbed a soda from the cooler and leaned against the patio post, watching me type. Always working, he said in a sing-song tone, cracking open the can. I didn't look up. Someone has to. He chuckled but didn't leave. You know, you should relax more. Life's not all about work. Work is what keeps me sane, I said, still typing. Then he stepped closer. Still thinking about my proposal? I did think about it. I replied evenly. And the answer is no. He tilted his head, pretending to be hurt. No? Not even a small loan? Come on, Al, you're doing great. It's just temporary. No, I said again, firmer this time. I can't help you, Brian. Something flickered in his eyes, disappointment quickly turning into resentment. Wow. So much for family loyalty. Before I could respond, Mom called from the kitchen. Allison, could you help me with the drinks? Coming. I closed the laptop halfway and placed it on the patio table beside my glass of iced tea. When I returned a few minutes later, carrying a tray of lemonade and fruit punch, I froze. Brian was standing by the edge of the pool, holding my laptop. The sun glinted off the metal casing as his fingers gripped the edges like a careless child holding a fragile toy. "Brian," I said carefully, setting the tray down. "What are you doing with that?" He smiled, that same sharp, mocking smile I'd seen 1,000 times growing up. "Just looking at your fancy gadget. Must be nice, huh? Top of the line, expensive, just like everything else you've got." My heart started to race. "Please put it down." "What's the big deal?" he said, pretending to examine it. "It's just a computer." "It's my work," I said, stepping closer. "And it's not just a computer." He turned slightly toward the pool, his grip loosening. "Relax, I'm not gonna—" Then it happened. A quick movement, a slip that didn't look accidental at all. The laptop flew from his hands, hit the water with a loud plunk, and sank fast. Ripples spread across the turquoise surface, swallowing every piece of my professional life in a few silent seconds. "Oh," Brian said, feigning surprise. "Guess my hands were wet." For a moment, everything stopped. Dad turned from the grill, Mom gasped from the doorway, and I just stood there, staring at the pool where my entire career now sat underwater. "Brian," Mom shouted, rushing over. "What were you thinking?" "It was an accident," he said, lifting his hands defensively. "She shouldn't have left it there." Dad immediately stepped in. "Enough. Accidents happen." His voice carried authority, but all I heard was the same old defense. "Always for Brian. Always." I didn't yell. I didn't even move right away. My silence filled the backyard heavily than any scream could. Then, without a word, I walked to the pool shed, pulled out the long aluminum net, and began fishing the laptop from the bottom. Water streamed from its edges as I lifted it out and placed it on the patio table. The device was ruined. My hands trembled, but my face stayed calm. "Allison, it was an accident," Dad said again. I finally looked up at him. "Was it?" He opened his mouth to respond, but the words died in his throat. Without another word, I picked up the dripping laptop, water still dripping down my arm, and went upstairs to my old room. I could hear Mom's hushed voice behind me and Dad muttering something about overreacting, but I blocked them out. In my room, I placed the laptop on towels and tried to dry it carefully. I pressed the power button, nothing. I tried again, holding it longer this time. Still nothing. The silence of the dead machine was deafening. That laptop held everything: the updated financials for my consulting business, client details, months of design work, and my own personal journals. I had backups, but not of the latest files. Those were gone. The future I had been building so carefully had just drowned because of my brother's petty revenge. A knock came at the door. Mom stepped in, holding a hairdryer. I thought this might help. I stared at it, then at her. "That's not how water damage works, Mom." "Oh," she whispered, setting it down anyway. "Brian feels terrible." I laughed, cold and bitter. "No, he doesn't. He got exactly what he wanted." She looked torn. "He would never." "Mom," I interrupted softly. "Please don't defend him. Not this time." Her lips trembled. "Your father wants to buy you a new one tomorrow." I shook my head. "It's not about replacing the laptop." When she left, I sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the lifeless device. For the first time in years, the anger inside me didn't dissolve into tears. It sharpened into something else: determination. This wasn't just about a machine or a lost file. This was about decades of double standards, of Dad making excuses, of Mom staying silent, of Brian never facing a single consequence. Not this time. I picked up my phone and called Samantha, my friend from Portland who worked in cybersecurity. "Can you help me with something?" I asked. "I need to find out what my brother's been up to." By the time the sun had set, Samantha had found more than I imagined. Multiple gambling accounts, 2 payday loans, and 3 credit cards opened under Dad's name. Brian wasn't just careless. He was reckless, desperate, and criminal. I hung up the phone and stared out the window at the pool, the water still glimmering under the moonlight. My ruined laptop sat on the desk, a silent reminder of what he had done, and of what I was going to do next. Tomorrow morning, my family's lies would finally hit the surface, just like that laptop had. I woke before dawn, my heartbeat already steady with purpose. The house was silent except for the faint ticking of the hallway clock and the low hum of the refrigerator downstairs. Outside, the Oregon sky was still dark, washed in the pale gray of early morning. I slipped out of bed, tied my hair back, and opened my laptop bag, not to work this time, but to begin a different kind of project. The ruined laptop still sat on the desk, its silver shell warped from the water, but beside it lay my phone, my true weapon for the day. I had already spent half the night setting things in motion, emails to banks, security alerts on Dad's accounts, and a detailed report to the family attorney. Every password had been changed, every account secured. Brian had spent his entire life depending on others to clean up after him, but this time, I was the one holding the broom, and I wasn't cleaning. I was uncovering. I moved quietly through the house, careful not to wake anyone. Dad's office door creaked slightly as I pushed it open. The room smelled faintly of sawdust and paper, the remnants of decades of running his construction business. On the desk sat a battered old desktop computer and a stack of ledgers. I booted the computer and confirmed what I already suspected. Brian had been accessing it for months. No password protection, no security, just open documents listing business account numbers and personal financial details. I photographed everything with my phone. The fake signatures, the forged checks, the credit accounts opened in Dad's name. When I left the office, the first hints of dawn were streaking the sky. I placed a small security camera on the bookshelf in the living room, angled perfectly toward the sitting area. It was time to capture the truth. I didn't want shouting matches or denials. I wanted proof that even Dad couldn't ignore this time. By 5:45 a.m., my plan was in motion. The house phone rang first. That old beige cordless one Dad refused to replace. The shrill tone cut through the morning silence. From my room, I heard the muffled sound of him answering. "Yes, this is Daniel Stevens," he said groggily. A pause. "What?" "No, I didn't open any credit account with your company." The confusion in his voice made my stomach twist. The second call came seconds later, this time his cell phone. Then the house phone again. One after another. Downstairs, the light flicked on. I stepped out of my room, pretending to have just woken up. Dad stood in the hallway, his robe half-tied, both phones in his hands, confusion turning slowly into alarm. "Something's going on with the bank," he said. "They're saying there are accounts in my name I've never heard of." Before I could respond, another sound joined the chaos, the buzzing of Brian's phone in the kitchen. Over and over, constant vibration against the counter. Mom came down the stairs, tightening her robe, her eyes wide. "Who's calling so early?" Dad shook his head. "Credit companies. Fraud departments. I don't understand." At that moment, Brian appeared, stumbling down the stairs in sweatpants and a t-shirt, eyes half open. "What the hell's going on? Who's making all that noise?" The house phone rang again. Dad answered. "Yes, this is Daniel Stevens. What address?" "No, I never authorized that purchase." "Wait, who's listed as the email contact?" His expression changed instantly. "What? briancreative@gmail.com? That's my son's email." The silence that followed was heavy. Even Mom froze at the bottom of the stairs, her hand gripping the railing. Dad turned to Brian slowly, his voice low and dangerous. "You want to explain that?" Brian's face drained of color. "It's gotta be a mistake. Maybe someone hacked my email or used my name." Dad's hand trembled slightly. "They used my name, Brian. My credit. My information." Before he could answer, headlights flickered through the window. I moved toward the living room, heart pounding, as a knock echoed through the house. Dad opened the door. Two uniformed officers stood on the porch. "Mr. Daniel Stevens?" one of them asked. "Yes," Dad said, gripping the doorknob tightly. We're responding to a report from multiple financial institutions about suspected identity theft. They've traced the accounts to this address. Mom gasped, clutching her chest. Brian froze, halfway between the kitchen and the hallway. This has to be some kind of joke, he muttered. Sir, the officer continued, we'll need to speak with everyone in the household. Dad stepped aside, letting them in. I stayed quiet, standing near the stairs. The camera I'd set earlier blinked faintly behind a row of books, capturing every second. The officers began explaining the situation. 3 credit cards opened fraudulently under Dad's name, totaling over $40,000 in debt, plus suspicious activity from the family emergency fund account. I could see the realization dawning on Dad's face, the betrayal sinking in. Brian stammered, I was going to pay it back. I just needed time. It wasn't supposed to go this far. Pay it back. Dad's voice broke. With what, Brian? You drained the emergency fund. You forged my signature. Mom stepped forward, tears streaking her face. Tell me this isn't true. Please tell me this isn't true. Brian's eyes darted toward me, and for a second, pure rage flashed across his face. You did this, he spat. You're behind this. You wanted to ruin me. I met his gaze calmly. You ruined yourself, Brian. I just stopped you from taking anyone else down with you. One of the officers turned toward Dad. Mr. Stevens, we'll need your statement and documentation. We may also need to take your son for questioning. Dad's shoulders sagged as if the weight of years had finally crashed down on him. Do what you need to, he said softly. That was when Brian snapped. You're just going to let them take me? After everything I've done for this family? What you've done, Dad said, his voice trembling with fury, is steal from me.
From us.
You've lied, forged my name, and nearly destroyed my future. I don't even recognize you anymore. Brian tried to back away toward the kitchen, but one of the officers stepped forward, hand on his belt. Sir, we'll need you to stay right here. He turned on me again, his face red with anger. You'll regret this, Allison. You think you're some kind of hero, but all you've done is destroy your family. No, I said quietly. For the first time, I saved it. The officers handcuffed him then, the metal clicking softly in the stillness. Mom sobbed, covering her face, and Dad just stood there, hollow, as if the world had tilted beneath him. The sound of the front door closing behind them left a vacuum of silence that no one could fill. I didn't speak for a long time. Eventually, Dad turned to me, his voice broken. I defended him for so many years. I thought I was protecting him, but I was just making him worse. I nodded, tears finally stinging my eyes. Sometimes love looks like protection. Sometimes it looks like consequences. He sank into the armchair, burying his face in his hands. Mom sat beside him, trembling. I walked upstairs, past the faint smell of coffee and ashes from the grill Dad had never finished using yesterday. The sky outside had turned a soft gold, the kind of beautiful morning that made the world look deceptively peaceful. Downstairs, everything was shattered. Lies, loyalty, and illusion. But maybe for the first time, there was also truth. And truth, though painful, was the beginning of something cleaner. Something real. The weeks that followed Brian's arrest felt like walking through the wreckage of a storm. Nothing looked the same, not the house, not my parents, not even the way I thought about family. For years, I had seen our family's dysfunction as an invisible weight I just had to carry. But now, the weight was visible to everyone, lying in shattered pieces on the living room floor, right where the truth had exploded. Brian accepted a plea deal. 6 months in county jail, 5 years of probation, and mandatory counseling for gambling addiction. He avoided prison, but he didn't avoid accountability. Dad's construction business, his life's work, had to be sold to cover legal costs and debt settlements. It broke my heart to see him hand over the company he'd built from the ground up, the one that bore his name on every truck and invoice. But even he admitted that maybe it was time. His body couldn't take the long hours anymore, and after what happened, he didn't have the same fire left in him. For weeks after, he barely spoke. He spent his mornings sitting on the porch with a cup of coffee, staring at the empty driveway where Brian used to park his truck. Mom tried to fill the silence with small talk and chores, but she was just as broken inside. I could see it in the way she hesitated before speaking, as though afraid of saying the wrong thing. Before I flew back to Chicago, Dad called me into the living room. A brand new laptop sat on the coffee table, still in its box. "I know it doesn't fix anything," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "But I wanted to replace what was taken from you." I stared at the box for a moment, my throat tight. "Dad, you don't have to." "Yes, I do," he interrupted gently. "I owe you an apology for more than just the laptop. I spent my whole life protecting Brian from consequences because I thought that was love. I never realized that by doing that, I was letting him hurt everyone else, including you." For a moment, I couldn't speak. Then I crossed the room and hugged him. It was the first real embrace we'd shared in years. When I returned to Chicago, I unpacked the laptop and placed it on my desk overlooking Lake Michigan. My apartment felt quiet, safe, and full of possibility. For days, I couldn't bring myself to open my old files or even look at the salvaged data I'd managed to recover from the water-damaged drive. It felt symbolic, like the old version of me, always fixing, always accommodating, needed to stay buried with that broken machine. Instead, I opened a new folder and began again. This time, I wrote my business plan from scratch. I redesigned my consulting model, refined my goals, and decided I would build something entirely mine. Every spreadsheet, every pitch deck, every note was backed up in 5 different places: local drives, cloud servers, and even a hard copy locked in a small fireproof safe by my desk. It wasn't just about protecting data anymore, it was about protecting my future. A month later, a former client from my tech firm reached out after hearing about my story through a mutual contact. She had started her own user experience consultancy in Boston and offered me a partnership worth $180,000 a year plus shares in the company. I was stunned. "You handled a personal disaster with strategy and composure," she said during our call. "That's the kind of person I want beside me in business." It wasn't just a job offer, it was validation. A reminder that resilience could rebuild what loss tried to destroy. Meanwhile, back in Portland, things were changing slowly. Mom started seeing a therapist, something she admitted she should have done years ago. She began to understand her pattern of silence wasn't peacekeeping, it was fear. Her weekly calls became gentler, more open. She told me about her sessions, about how she was learning to speak up for herself, even when it meant disagreeing with Dad. Dad, too, was changing. He started volunteering at a local trade school, teaching young builders about construction safety and ethics. "I can't undo what happened," he said over the phone one evening, "but I can make sure someone else learns from my mistakes." For the first time, I heard pride in his voice that wasn't rooted in denial. Then, one quiet afternoon about a year later, an email appeared in my inbox. The sender's name made my heart skip. Brian Stevens. I stared at it for several minutes before opening it. The message was short. "I'm 1 year clean from gambling. I'm working with a therapist on making amends. I know I don't deserve forgiveness, but I wanted to say thank you for forcing me to face myself." I leaned back in my chair, staring out at the endless stretch of blue water beyond my window. The waves shimmered under the afternoon sun, calm and steady, like they'd always been. For years, I'd chased peace through keeping quiet, through smoothing things over, through forgiving too quickly. But now, I understand peace was never found in silence. It was found in truth, in setting boundaries, in refusing to be the family's emotional sponge. I didn't respond right away. I needed to think, not about him, but about myself. Forgiveness, I realized, wasn't about excusing what someone did. It was about freeing yourself from the hold of what they did. And I wasn't there yet. I closed the laptop and stood by the window. The reflection of the city lights shimmered in the glass as evening fell. Chicago had become more than a city to me. It was a symbol of everything I'd fought for. My independence, my work, my life, built from the ground up with no one's permission but my own. In time, I started therapy too. I wanted to understand my own patterns, the parts of me that always tried to fix others before fixing myself. My therapist, Dr. Karen, helped me see that boundaries aren't walls, they're doors with locks you control. Months later, Mom called to invite me to their 35th wedding anniversary celebration. "Your father wants everyone there," she said softly. I hesitated. I knew Brian would be there, freshly out of probation, probably trying to make amends. "I'll think about it," I told her. That weekend, instead of going to Portland, I sent a gift, a framed photo of the three of us taken years ago before things fell apart. Underneath, I wrote a note. Healing isn't about forgetting. It's about learning to live differently. When Mom called to thank me, her voice was warm, understanding. "We're proud of you," she said. "We finally see how strong you've always been." That night, I opened my new laptop again. The blue glow of the screen filled the room as I began drafting my next big project proposal. A part of me wondered if I would ever truly forgive Brian, but another part, the calmer, wiser part, knew I already had in the only way that mattered. Because forgiveness didn't mean letting him back in. It meant allowing myself to move on. And as I sat there, the city lights dancing across the water outside my window, I realized something simple and profound. Peace isn't given, it's built, one choice at a time. And finally, after everything, I was free to build mine.